Hey guys, Professor Matt here with an overview of Chapter 4. Chapter 4, the title of it is Relationship Management. We get to the heart of what we do in PR. Okay, so here's the scenario. You are at a board meeting, right? And with you, you've got the Vice President of Finance, you've got the Vice President of Law, the legal team, and you as the Vice President of Communication. And the CEO is going around the room asking how you contribute to the bottom line. So she asks you, she asks the first person, the lawyer, what do you do? Well, I keep us out of law trouble. Then she asks the vice president of finance what he does, and he says, well, I make sure that we keep the books and we're financially solvent and we report correctly and so forth. And then she comes to you and says, well, you as the PR person, how do you contribute to the bottom line of the organization? What are you going to say? That's what this chapter is about, the value of public relations. What we do is critically important because building these long-term, mutually beneficial relationships will help sales and marketing and everything else work. Okay, we manage relationships that all other departments depend on, and that's our value. We are in the relationship building business, and the ethical, harmonious, and simultaneous management of all those relationships may be the toughest jobs there is, and that's what we do. Okay, so if we're in the relationship management business, the question is, how do we do that? How do we help manage the relationships that an organization has with its various publics? Now, the fact is, every organization does have relationships, but what we believe in PR is that those relationships need to be managed proactively. Okay, so one of the interesting things is when we started to shift in the 1980s away from publicity as the main focus of PR to relationship management, new theories were coming into play. Okay, and one discipline that's had a lot of interest and a lot of influence in contemporary PR is the area of interpersonal communication or relationship management. So there are relational strategies, relational maintenance strategies that we can tap into because they totally make sense for PR. Okay, so let me just highlight a few of these that are in your textbook. One is openness. Relationships do better when there is an openness. And we talked about this before, the idea of transparency, and we need to be transparent with our publics that we interact with. Okay. Another one is assurances, and assurances is the idea that we want to emphasize to our publics that we want to be in relationship with them. Okay, that we value them. We want to demonstrate that not just through our words, because remember, 90% of what we do in PR is going to be behavior. The other 10% is going to be spoken. So we want to demonstrate to our publics that we value them. Sharing tasks. Just one more I want to do. So the idea of sort of participatory culture, we want to make sure that we get buy-in from our various publics, and that means including them on decisions, including them on various new products. I mean, you see that occasionally a company will say, hey, you name the next flavor that we have of potato chips, whatever it might be. Okay, and there's other things like trust. Obviously, we talked about that before. Control. I mean, how much control does a public feel like they have with us as an organization? But here's the key thing to remember is that the better the long-term relationships between your organization and the publics, the more likely that you are to achieve your goals. Okay? And that's super important for our CEOs and our senior execs to understand that those relationships actually help the organization achieve its mission. Okay? So healthy relationships can save organizations from boycotts and lawsuits and all the other things. And all these things, they suck money out of an organization. So we can save an organization money by helping to prevent stuff that happens through poor relationships. Okay, so there's different kinds of relationships that the textbook talks about. One is a news-driven relationship. If you're doing media relations, you're going to be in news relationships. There's a whole art to how we do that, but primarily, just quickly, if you want to have good relationships with the media, it means being empathetic, empathizing with what they are looking for. Remember that most news organizations are under super tight deadlines. If you want to have a good relationship with the media, you need to understand that and be responsive to them. And by the way, and I'll talk about this in my own top 10 foundational principles, but you never want to refuse to tell your side of the story. And that's a tough call to make because some of your execs or your clients are going to say, well, listen, this is bad news. Why would we want to tell bad news? Well, two reasons. One, you are going to tell your story better than anybody else. And two, if you're not available to talk about bad news, then the media is not going to be around when you want to talk about good news. Okay, again, it's the whole idea of being transparent. Another kind of relationship would be B2C, which just means business to consumers. So if you're doing business to consumers, that could be the kinds of things you would do to help consumers stay in relationship with you, to buy your product or use your service or adopt your idea, whatever it might be. You might be doing B2B. That's business to business, and that's a different kind of a thing. But the same principles hold that you want to be trustworthy and you want to have integrity and you want to be there and present and assurances that you want to be in relationship with them. Another super important relationship has to do with employees. Now, employees, that's an internal audience. Some people who do public relations, therefore, never do anything with an external audience. They're not doing media relations, they're not doing community relations, but they're focused on their internal audience. Employees are your most important audience because if employees have high morale and they understand how what they do contributes to the mission, then they're much more likely to be productive and be great ambassadors for you and your organization. Okay, so there are people that just do employee relations, and that's a super important part of what we do. Another one might be investor relations. If you're a company if you're a public company and you have investors that you need to pay attention to, remember, if it's a public company, investors own your company. So being careful and communicating clearly with your shareholders is going to be super important. Other kinds of relationships like issues-driven relationships, that's more like nonprofit organizations. And for nonprofit organizations, you've got volunteers, you've got donors, and all kinds of different relationships that would go in there. So all of those are key in making sure that we try to employ these relational maintenance strategies. So really focus on that because these theories have now come into PR to help us be better relational managers. And remember, that's the value we bring in a really significant way, that we make sure that organizations have long-term, mutually beneficial relationships. Last thing is that this chapter ends with another ethics scenario. It talks about social responsibility. It's a big thing today, this idea of corporate social responsibility. A lot of companies have CSR reports, and they might be dedicated just to doing that. It's not enough today to make a good product, because what people want to know is, what are you doing good for the world too? Now, first and foremost, that product's got to be good. That service has to be good. No amount of philanthropy is going to make up for poor products or services. But besides that, if you are using your core competencies as an organization to address world problems or even local problems, the chances are, if all things being equal, if there's a company that's doing that and a company that's not doing that, consumers today really want to do business with companies that are doing good things above and beyond the products that they make. So that's a good thing to remember. Go ahead and look at that case study at the end of the chapter. You're going to see it's a great one on Coca-Cola and what they do. Super important in today's public relations market. So that's chapter 4. I would encourage you to read the chapter if you haven't done so already. Take the quiz, participate in the discussion, post and respond, and then also look at the PowerPoints that are there as well. Okay, that's it for today. We'll be back next time. Take care.